Welcome back to Adult Education. I was just saying to Peter Gonthier that I'm of the philosophy that if you have an announced starting time, you should start because that respects the people that came. And it also respects your speaker, because I always didn't like it when somebody would hold till the last person got in 5 minutes past the starting time, which was stealing from the end of my talk. And I said, I'd rather have people walking in on my talk than walking out on it at the end. I'm not going to steal more of Peter Gonthier's time to reintroduce him beyond saying that I know there was great appreciation for the session last week. I got some emails from people who told me how their mind was stretched and how blown away they were by the magnitude of his knowledge. And I've been thinking this week, and maybe you have too, about some of the things he spoke of. How could it be that a grain of sand, relative to all the grains of sand on all the world's beaches, is the scale of our sun relative to that of the whole universe? And that all this stuff 13.8 years ago exploded out of a single point. My mind can't get itself around that. And so I just go back to savoring my coffee and thinking about my family problems on my little planet in this little far corner of the universe. But Peter Gonthier, I think, is going to think more deeply about the human and spiritual implications of some of what he was talking about last week. And I know, like every speaker, after the first week, you kick yourself for things you wish you'd said, and this is your opportunity to say them, Peter. So with great appreciation from us all, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate this. Thanking all of you for coming back. It's nice to see you all. Indeed, as the time ended, Dave came up to me and he said, "What is this redshift and how do you measure it?" And I said, "Oh golly, that was one of the main things I talked about was redshift here and redshift there, and what does it all mean?" And so I want to take a couple of minutes to go back and define that redshift. So we'll start with the first redshift measurements. Basically, redshift is the galactic recessional velocity. That is the relative velocity between us and other galaxies out there. Vesto Silfer in 1914 is credited with a astronomer who first observed this. And these were very, very difficult measurements because you had to crawl up inside the telescope where the light came to focus, and you had to have a diffraction grating there that would spread the light out and expose it onto some sort of picture exposure, I guess, of the film. There we go. It's getting worse and worse as I get older. Apologize for that. And you know, oftentimes Edwin Hubble is given credit for this, but you know, Vesto was the guy that did it. And Hubble indeed measured the distance of the galaxies that Vesto had measured the velocities of, and then could make this plot. To measure the distance, he had to use some trick that Henrietta Swan Livy discovered, that certain stars pulsate, swell, that their log of their period is proportional to the luminosity. And she did this by looking at Cepheid variables in the large and small Magellanic Clouds, which are nearby. And so that enabled Edwin Hubble to look at Andromeda and other galaxies. Actually, we're speaking here of galaxies beyond our local group, because our local group, these galaxies are bound and are essentially approaching us. Whereas beyond the local group, our local neighborhood, as you might say, which extends out to maybe 3 million light years. And so you go further on out and look at some further galaxies. And Vesto obtained a few galaxies that are indicated here. And so this is a picture of the galaxies on the left, the distance that they're at in light years. Light year is the distance that light travels in a year, which is 10 trillion kilometers. That's a long ways. Light travels about 500 seconds between us and the sun. About 5 hours to Neptune, and so forth. So the nearest star from us is Proxima Centauri, and that's 4.3 light years away. So mostly we're in a lot of empty space right now, which is a good thing for us. This is the film that Vesto exposed to measure the shift in wavelength of some calcium absorption features known as K and H, which are two blue features that appear near the blue end of the visible spectrum. And if the galaxy is receding from us, these features will be shifted toward the right, which is toward the red end. And that's where the redshift comes into play, that this is the redshift. How much they're shifted depends on their speed. The faster the velocity, the greater the shift. For small shifts like Vesto was able to observe, it's basically the difference in wavelength divided by the wavelength of the hydrogen that you observe in the lab, stationary, is equal to the ratio of the velocity to the speed of light. It gets more complicated as you go faster and faster, because then some relativistic effects need to be taken into account. So these are the velocities that are measured, and Hubble was then able to make a plot, which is velocity in kilometers per second as a function of distance in megaparsecs. And okay, so here's another lingo thing. What is a parsec? A parsec is 3.26 light years. So the astronomers use parsecs just like they use light years, and it comes from the method that is used to measure parallax to the nearby stars. But it's basically a distance. And keep this in mind that we're going out to 2 parsecs. 2 times 3.26 is about 6.5 million light years away. So it's really close. And he's picking up a series of galaxies that seem to plot in a straight line. There's a lot of scatter there, yes. But this is a very crude measurement. And Vesto has to be very still inside the big telescope way at the top without jiggling things around too much, which is hard to do, I'm afraid. Nowadays, we have plots that are based on certain other standard candles that we know the luminosity of those. It's like a 100-watt light bulb that you know it gives out 100 watts. And so if you take a picture of it, you're basically measuring the flux, the brightness, and you're able to know the distance. It's that kind of trick that is used. And so the velocity here is basically this redshift that is being observed. And here it's basically showing us that 72 seems to be about the right slope for this line, which is known as the Hubble constant. And it's basically the slope of this line, so that's kilometers per second per megaparsec. And that's the 72. 1 over h naught, with a little bit of shifting the units around, gives you the age of the universe, approximately. And that's where we get about 13.8 billion light years. Although as you go way out there, you got to take into account a particular cosmological model. But notice this is going out to about 450 megaparsecs, and Hubble was 2. So this extends things rather dramatically. And this is going out to a redshift of 1. And James Webb is measuring redshifts of 13, which is really basically going out to the very beginning. Now, what does that mean for all the galaxies beyond our local cluster are moving away from us? Well, a very cute little picture that is often done is you take a balloon, you put some galaxies on it, and you inflate the balloon, and you see that the distance between the galaxies increases everywhere on the surface of the balloon. So it's a nice two-dimensional representation of the expansion. Even nicer yet is to draw a grid on there. And you see, relative to the grid, the galaxies did not move. So it's not that the galaxies are moving apart, it's the space between us that is expanding. And that space expands the wavelength of the light. So there's a general relativistic effect due to this expansion that reddens the light as well, which we also need to consider. But anyway, so this is then all of the stuff that Webb was doing, and basically they take a particular place in the spectrum, in the infrared spectrum, that they recognize. And this is what is referred to as the Lyman break. Lyman is the spectra of hydrogen that if you observe the Lyman series, it's going to be in the ultraviolet. And you see this ultraviolet has been shifted all the way into the infrared. It's been redshifted significantly. And we're measuring 13.2 all the way down to something like 10 in this deep field image that we saw before. And Webb is trying to push and see really ultimately the very first galaxies that formed in the universe. And that's the beauty of Webb. Hubble was not able to do it, and Webb is already doing it with 1 day of exposure. Imagine Webb dedicating 2 weeks. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Watch carefully what comes out. Well, I wanted to shift gears, and I wanted to elaborate on my take of the heavens are declaring the glory of God. My take on the presence of God, and I just added minutes before coming this way, the passage in Acts 17:28, in him we live and move and have our being. How do we understand all of this? And that's where I want to go today. So the beautiful images are not going to be there anymore. You're going to have to be patient with my babble. Blah, 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 blah. What does all that mean? Okay. Well, let's see how we can go about it. And we're going to have to speed it up, yes. So creation in the Old Testament, we have God in Genesis 1 creating the heavens and the earth, the universe, galaxies, solar system, life, us. Isaiah saying, okay, lift up your eyes, look at the heavens. Who created these? He who brings out the starry host one by one, calls forth each of them by name, because of his great power and strength, not one of them are missing. And we had 10 to the 22, 10 to the 23 stars in the universe, observable universe now. We have to keep that in mind, that there's who knows how much bigger out there that we can't see and we will never ever be able to see. So as the universe continues to expand, everything is moving apart. Eventually we'll just have a dark sky. At least no galaxies. Maybe we'll still have our stars in our own galaxy. But the very beginning of the universe will have gone out of sight. So whatever we need to do it quickly. Technology, we need technology. Well, Psalm 33 here also tells us, by the word of the Lord, the heavens were made. And of course, that is echoing Genesis 1. He brings everything forth. The New Testament, we have the passage in John 1. Through him, through Christ, all things, through the Word, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. And here, it's a little bit more careful in elaborating for us that everything was created, that which we can see and that which we cannot see. And so it's more this idea of creation out of nothing in the New Testament, but certainly not in Genesis 1. For we have this chaos that is there, and we'll see that. We'll go back to that. The Lord sustains the universe. And I don't need to convince you of that, right? If you remove the Lord, what happens to the universe? We cease to exist, right? Some passages here in Job. Where were you when I laid the foundation? Tell me. If you understand. When the earth and all its people quake, it is I who holds the pillars firm. And this is kind of the cosmology of the ancient Near East, where the land was supported on these columns, these pillars. New Testament, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. The sun, Hebrews, the sun is the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation of His being, sustaining all things by His powerful word. Well, we know these passages. This group, I don't have to convince. But now suppose you were to ask a physicist, what sustains the universe? What do you think a physicist would say? And this is not a religious physicist like myself, but even an atheist physicist, if you like. What sustains the universe? Well, in physics, we have the laws of physics. And there are these laws that things that are conserved, and the laws that describe physics on Earth and everywhere else in the universe, which is amazing. I mean, even Newton applied his theory of gravity that then Kepler took and described the solar system and so forth, and on and on. And we're wanting to describe the very beginning. No can do. Well, we vaguely understand the laws that are out there, and that's what the laws of physics, as we call them in physics land, they're approximations of those laws. And I would say, okay, the laws of nature are the true laws. They're the real ones that we discover and use the laws of physics to describe them. But we know that we don't have the complete understanding yet. Imagine electron. An electron is a particle. Was it discovered or invented? And if you're a physicist, you would obviously say it was discovered. If you're a philosopher, maybe you would say they invented it, because they don't know what they're talking about. The universe is a mathematical structure. Even Galileo said that. The book written, he's talking about nature, the book written in the language of mathematics. If we're going to understand it, we need to understand the mathematics. Eugene Wigner, the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the physical science. And Max Tegmark, he's a current cosmologist, MIT. The physical world is mathematics, a mathematical structure. In his book, Our Mathematical Universe, My Quest for the Nature of Ultimate Reality. It's a good book. The first part of it, he's telling you the way things are. So he goes through all of this cosmology in a nice, simple, easy to read, and then he goes crazy, okay? And he tells you that that's what he's going to do. He goes crazy. He's into speculation land. So he talks about level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, multiverses, okay? And I am not going to go there. In other words, the laws of nature transcend the universe, and Plato was right. There is this ideal world out there. And many physicists indeed speak that way, including Max Tegmark and even Roger Penrose, if you wish, a British cosmologist. he will very well say Plato was right and talk about this Platonic world where the laws of nature exist and govern the universe. And it makes sense to me because if the universe is obeying these laws of nature that we can see, at least through a darkened mirror, but there's much more out there that we cannot see. So I want to expand nature to include a whole other aspect that we cannot see. Sometimes we refer to that as the supernatural, or something that is beyond the physical. The evolution of the universe is determined by these laws of reality. So reality, I'm expanding nature more than just what we can see. The universe is sustained by these laws. So the physics sustains the universe. But there's another book that tells us what? The Lord sustains. So which is it? But now ask a physicist, where do the laws that you're talking about exist? And their jaw drops and says, they lift up their hands in the air, well, it's the mathematics. Well, where does the mathematical structure of the universe exist? And this is interesting, and people are going way out in left field on things. The Lord is involved. We know that. I have here a few passages that describe that. In His creation, Psalm 50 here, I know every bird in the mountains. Isn't that cool? God knows every bird in the mountains. And the insects of the fields are mine. And a biologist would tell us the insects is the largest species group that we know of. God can do all of this? Another psalm, He covers the sky with clouds, He supplies the earth with rain and makes the grass grow on the hills. Maybe we should acknowledge that when we're trying to get grass to grow in our yards. In Jesus, look at the birds of the air, they do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. And are you not much more valuable? Well, of course. But does God really do all of this? The Lord is present. Where can I go from your spirit, says the psalmist? Where can I flee from your presence? The moon, maybe? Well, as Apollo astronauts have been there, and they were still very much moved by the presence of God, as they described some things, at least some of them were. Isaiah again, for this is what the high and exalted one says, He who lives forever, whose name is holy. I live in a high and holy place, but also with the one who is contrite and lowly in spirit, to revive the spirit of the lowly and to revive the heart of the contrite. So you see God living in a high and holy place. He is holy, He is perfect, He is spirit, and he is in a high and holy place, and yet he is here for us. Who are contrite and lowly in spirit. Am I only a God nearby, declares the Lord, and not a God far away? And Jesus and John, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever. It's interesting, you know, God is wanting to be with us. From the very beginning, we see him walking in the garden, that Garden of Eden, wanting to be present. And we shun him, we violate his covenant, and he says, okay, build a tabernacle, I want to dwell there with you. Build a temple, I want to dwell there with you. He always wants to be with us. The Lord is present, but he's separate. God is transcendent, separate from the universe. He's holy, Spirit, he's perfect. The universe is in good functioning order. That's the word good that is used in Genesis. That's what the Hebrew means. It doesn't mean perfect. It means it's functioning good, even very good. But then when Adam finishes naming the atoms, what happens? The animals, all of a sudden something is not good. It's not perfect. It's functioning correctly, the way God intended it. But it's not perfect. We, Adam and Eve, were not perfect. They were not immortal. They needed to eat of the tree of life. The Lord is immanent, here with us, involved. He hears us. He answers our prayers. He stands by us, brings us comfort, peace, hope, shalom. He is Emmanuel, as Isaiah proclaims, that the Lord will give us a sign, a virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and we'll call him Emmanuel, God with us. Now I'm going to switch because the next slide is going to have something that really blows you away, and I want to explain this a little bit. Astronomers and cosmologists have succeeded the best they can at the moment in measuring the energy content of the universe. Even though we don't know what 95% of it is, we know that it's there. And we will find out what it is. Give us a few years, you know. For various reasons, we have concluded that the stars and us, and even the gas that we don't see, but it's out there, makes up about 5% of the energy content of the universe. Then we know that there's this dark matter, some say. Other say that we don't understand gravity. And so there is this controversy at the moment going on, so we'll see what happens there. And all of a sudden we discover that the universe is not slowing down in its expansion, but is accelerating, expanding faster and faster. And this requires what Einstein put in there to make a static universe in the very beginning in his general theory of relativity, a cosmological constant. We need a cosmological constant, interestingly enough, with a different sign. This behaves as an anti-gravity. Now there's a critical energy density, and the energy density that is observed divided by this critical energy density is what is characterized by this omega naught. And omega naught is very close to 1. We are measuring 0.01 plus or minus 0.02, 1.02 plus or minus 0.02. So 1 is included in the uncertainty there. And even if it's not, as you go back in time, this number gets closer and closer to 1 in an amazingly dramatic way. So if you go back to, say, the nucleosynthesis, the first 3 minutes of the Big Bang, you're close to 1 within, I don't know, probably 60 decimal places. The fact that it's 1, it means that the energy density of the universe is critical. It means that the geometry of our universe is flat. It's Euclidean out there. The sum of the angles of a triangle is, what is it, 360, right? Or 180, one of those, 360, 90, no, it's 180. 180, yeah. I'm getting old. We live on a flat surface, a flat piece of paper, or a cylinder in a two-dimensional representation. We don't live on a sphere, the Earth, where the angles of a triangle can be much more, 360 there, or the surface of a saddle on a horse, which is hyperboloid. So it's flat. It means the critical energy of the universe, the total energy is critical. You sum up everything in the universe. You know what you get? A big goose egg. 0. Because you have positive energy, you have negative energy, which is gravity. And this is what inflation does for us, is separating something and giving us positive energy and negative energy. And that's our universe. What does it take to create a universe? Nothing. That's what omega equals to 1 is telling us. They don't tend to say that because cosmologists, to describe how this comes about, always need something. They need an embedded space-time out there, they need something else. Watch out when they say out of nothing, because their nothing is always something. You cannot do the problem of something coming out of nothing. And nothing is really nothing, nothingness. So significant aspects of the universe had a beginning, and that's interestingly enough, but it's also flat. Creation ex nihilo, out of nothing. God, or the laws of reality, more than just the physical aspects, should account for the fine-tuning aspects of our universe. There's 38 constants of nature that physicists will quote, 32 constants out there that have very special values. If you tweak one of them, life is not supported in the universe. That tells us that our universe is very special. But rather than saying, well, of course, it was designed that way with us in mind, which we don't mind saying, but not the scientist. The scientist will then say, oh, they really appear to us as accidental because we have no way of describing them. And so then we say, okay, now we have a multiverse, some sort of theory that says that the universe keeps on replicating itself, and we're just one of infinite number of universes out there. Oh, but we can't probe them. We can't see them. We can't study them. So this borders on, is it scientific or philosophical? God or the laws of reality allow ordered structures to form out of what seems like chaos. You go back to the cosmic microwave background, you have this haze. And out of this haze, this fog, comes large-scale structures of galaxies. Galaxies, solar systems, and order comes out of seemingly disorder. And life. And what is driving all of this? We say, well, it's allowed, yes, but what's driving it, what's behind it? Well, God is always involved in all of this because the laws are telling you what the universe has to do. The universe initial state had to be a highly ordered state. Now we need to put in the second law of thermodynamics, which says that the order of the universe can only stay the same or increase, depending upon whether it's closed or open, but that's something. So this initial fog, which had these very small temperature fluctuations in it, is where all this beautiful universe comes from. That means that this initial state has to be a highly ordered system. And no cosmologist can explain to you why. My thoughts. I see a connection or a correspondence between God's presence and the laws that govern our universe, all of reality, that which we can see and that which we cannot see. The laws of reality transcend the universe. This is Plato land. Contemplate God's existence before the universe was created. So there's God, he's contemplating making the universe. He says the universe is going to be this way because this is what I have in mind. And this is how the universe comes about, and then he has to sustain it throughout the evolution. His vision of the universe to sustain human life somewhere, some location within it. Maybe there's more than one place. I am not chasing alien life around at the moment. But the reason we're here requires the universe to be old and big, okay? It has to make the elements that our bodies need. And so therefore it has to be several billion years old at least. God's presence is all-encompassing, establishes covenant with his people here on earth, but also a covenant with his creation. The universe unfolds according to his plan that he had in mind, and he sustains it as it evolves. He envisions the ultimate end of our universe. Everything that is created in our universe is going to end. But he has a perfect one. This is not just good, but perfect one in mind, in which this somehow comes about in the new heavens and the new earth. There's no more chaos, no more evil, no more death. How do we understand this puzzle? Well, Genesis 1 is very helpful to some of us. The Babylonians are given credit for a 7-day week, perhaps due to the waning and waxing of the new and full moons. It's about a week. Many Jewish festivals later were 7 days. Aaron and his sons were ordained in 7 days. 7 days of atonement. Feast of Unleavened Bread is 7 days. Dedication of Solomon's temple, 7 days. The Sabbath is the 7th day. So it's not surprising that the author of Genesis 1 chooses a literary week to display the acts of creation as a ceremony. The cosmology of the ancient Near East, Babylon and Assyria and so forth, is shared with Israel, the Hebrews. But the theology is very different. So if we know what the cosmology of the Babylonians and that culture is, we begin to understand better what Genesis might be saying to us. And I owe this to a dear friend, John Walton, Old Testament scholar at Wheaton College, who's an expert in the ancient Near East. He's dedicated his life to that. He knows it well and has illuminated Genesis, in my mind, the best we can do to understand it at this point. So let's look at Genesis 1:2. Now the earth was formless and empty. There's the tohu and wabohu, the chaotic states, without order and empty. Darkness is over the surface of the deep, the chaos, the waters. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So the Spirit of God, God Himself, is going to bring about order. But there, it has to be highly ordered. Why? Because God is there, and He can do it. He is God. He can order. He can take that disorder and with His power and intelligence and might can order the chaos to bring about the beauty of the universe. In the ancient Near East, we have chaos, order, and disorder, where they were fundamental. And this is coming from John Walton. And so that we see that in Genesis 1 here. We have 3 days of filling to counteract the formless, filling, and a parallel 3 days of 3 days of ordering to counteract the formlessness, and 3 days of filling, the 4th through the 6th day of filling. And it's not about the material universe that is the story. It's about ordering, giving structure that Walton has in mind. And then we come to the seventh day and we say, well, God rests, takes a siesta. This is the most important day. This is the culminating day. This is the meaning of the week. In the ancient Near East, when a god rests, they always rest in a temple. So what this is telling us is that God is resting in his temple, the universe. It's a temple text. And the week is a week of celebration of God coming in and indwelling the temple. He's incarnated himself into the universe in order to sustain it and to bring about what he has in mind. I was going to bring in a Babylonian creation account, Enuma Elish, and show you how this takes place, how they indwell in the temple and they find their rest there. But somebody might take a picture in the back and say, hey, this guy's bringing polytheism into the classroom here. So I decided not to go there. And I decided the Old Testament is good enough. In Exodus 40, set up the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, on the first of the month, the first day of the first month. That's the first day of the year. Take the anointing oil and anoint the tabernacle and everything in it, consecrated, all its finishings. It will be holy. And then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. Solomon's temple, he spent 7 years building it. The dedication, Feast of Tabernacles, 7th month and 7 days. They celebrated 7 days of festival to commemorate Solomon's temple. And that's what you see in Genesis 1. God's resting place. When he comes into his resting place, he's going to sit on his throne and rule. That's the picture of the ancient Near East deity who rests. Psalm 132, God has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his dwelling, saying, this is my resting place forever and ever. I will sit enthroned where I have desired it. God rests in the temple on his throne to rule his kingdom. And the Word became flesh and literally tabernacled among us. And then finally in Revelations 22, the throne of God and the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve them. The immanence of God, we're coming to the end here. God is transcendent clearly. Then God finds rest in the universe, sits on his throne to control and sustain the universe. He plays the same role as the laws of creation. Some of those we know, some we cannot know. God is present within the universe as the universe evolves from this state of low entropy, creating order, forming large-scale structures, galaxies, planetary systems, our solar system, life, us, etc. He's always present, immanent throughout Emmanuel. This makes it possible for us to have a personal relationship with God. All right, so here comes another twister. How can we have a relationship with God? Are we not physical? and separate from God as Holy Spirit and perfect. And here I'm going to go into some theme that our dear brother Dave knows well. What is consciousness? Nobody knows. But it's not brain activity. David Chalmers in the 90s said the hard problem about consciousness is trying to understand how is that we have this experience of redness. You know, it is something that is giving us this experience that is beyond brain activity. What is it made out of? Well, many neuroscientists are coming to the conclusion that consciousness is fundamental, and so that this means everything is conscious. The chair has some consciousness to it. And that doesn't solve the entire problem, but that solves the problem of where does consciousness come from. It's always there. There's other problems to that. But consciousness is more than brain activity. And then the question is, can we probe consciousness? Is it physical? Or is consciousness our spirit? And I want to offer an example, and I know I'm going to run out of time here. I'm going to choose to wave at you, yeah? And I want to say that's a free choice. I can choose to do that or not. And I'm deciding, okay, do I want to do that? Okay. So I wave at you. There's a conscious decision which is made freely by my consciousness, by myself, that then somehow creates the brain activity that is necessary to raise my hand and arm and shake it. Now, it's clear that the brain activity comes before me shaking it. There's a time delay. And some people will use that and say, see, you don't have free will. Because it was already decided. Your brain activity came first. But there was a conscious choice even before that, by this thing we call consciousness. Signs and wonders. Well, if God performs miracles, does he violate the laws? I would say no, because the laws are, as I said one time in my senior seminar, the laws of nature are the hands of God. I think that's a very beautiful metaphor. They reflect his presence, so I don't think so. We never will know the full extent of the laws of God. We can study some of them through empirical explorations, but we're not going to know them all. And we envision reality to merge the natural and the supernatural. The Old Testament didn't have those distinctions. Somewhere this must have happened during the Hellenistic period. The Greeks, we always blame the Greeks. We might as well blame the Greeks on that. God does not intervene. He's not an interventionist. That would say that he's not here and he has to intervene. He's always here. He doesn't need to intervene. So think about that one. God is always involved, and he's always present. Read Psalm 104. God is always present in everything. So Psalm 19, the heavens do indeed declare the glory of God. Amen. I end there. Sorry for zapping the time, but I'm happy to stick around.
So you can see why it's such a pleasure for me to have spent more than half a century on Hope's campus surrounded by great and interesting minds such as Peter Gonthier. And he certainly stretched my mind. And I've gotten to thinking just about the number 7, for example. I'd never appreciated the biblical creation story in the context of all those 7s. By the way, 7 is a big number in psychological science, too. We call it the magic number 7 because, for example, people can remember 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information in short-term memory at one time. And there's a number of other magical 7s within the discipline. So I'm going to be thinking some more about the number 7. So Dr. Gonthier has made himself available if you'd like to hang around and ask your questions about the deep universe and the future of this ever-expanding universe. And could I ask that maybe just as one final question? Because there was a good question asked about the history, whether the history predicts the future. And you kind of said, no, we really just studied the history. But if the universe is ever-expanding, what's its ultimate fate?
Well, we don't know. We don't understand this acceleration and the expansion. We don't know what it is or what really is going on there. Is it going to continue in the future? But or is at some point the universe going to collapse back on itself?
Back to a point.
Back to nothingness. We don't know that either. Omega is going to be close to 1, which means it really should expand forever. And that means everything gets isolated, the galaxies. And we're left with our own galaxy, and that's about it. And of course, then the stars fizzle out. And that's kind of the prediction, this heat death. But we can't see that. And that's what I was mainly saying last time, that we can't see it. Well, we can't really predict it to be sure.
Right. One other question, which I think some people may have, and that is you today gave us 2 kind of images of the universe. One, this expanding sphere, but the other as flat. Now, to say it's flat, is that saying it exists on a 2-dimensional plane rather than...
No. It's, when we say it's flat, we're speaking of its geometry. It's Euclidean. Even though you envision a spherical universe, it's flat.
It's on the surface of the sphere? Is that, I'm trying to think of how I should think about it.
A surface of a sphere would be a curved surface.
Right.
Because like the surface of the Earth, you see the ships go out and the hulls fade and so forth. But it's a geometric thing. It's complicated.
Okay. Well, I'm starting to have my conversation with him, and so you are welcome to do so. Jane, do you want to give us a little preview of what's up next week?
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Thank you
You're
very
very welcome.
much. Yeah. You have given us much to think and ponder, and my husband and I will have a great conversation over dinner, I'm sure. Thank you very much. Next week, if you pick up or see the link online as well, the Advent issue for Salt and Light, which is out today, you'll notice that there's an article about the Iona trip in here, and if you come next week, you will hear from all of those who participated in the Iona trip, as they will be presenting next week. And also in here, there's an article with Terry DeYoung about accessibility, and the week following that, on December 3rd, the first Sunday in Advent, we will have guests talking about aging in place. So look forward to those, and thank you all. And please don't be late for worship.